At my sister-in-law's wedding, my husband told the staff, "Don't worry about her plate, she'll eat later." His aunt laughed loudly, saying, "She's used to scraps anyway." I quietly folded my napkin. Minutes passed. "Here, I brought something for dessert." The whole venue fell silent as I opened it. We met in the most ordinary way, a grocery store line in downtown Milwaukee. Clark made a dry joke about my basket having wine, candles, and frozen dumplings. "What a Friday night." I laughed. He had this warm sarcasm, the kind that makes you feel clever just for keeping up. He was a manager at one of his family's hardware stores. I was in town for a weekend conference. That night turned into brunch the next day, then a year of long-distance drives from Minneapolis to Milwaukee, then a proposal in Door County under a spray of orange and red leaves. I moved to Wisconsin for him. I had a stable job in Minneapolis, but love makes you believe that sacrifice is just part of the deal. I told myself his family would become mine. But the Merricks? They never hid how they felt. From the first family dinner I attended, it was clear that I was a novelty at best, an inconvenience at worst. Roberta, his mother, always found ways to mention how humble her family roots were. Helena, his aunt, laughed too loudly at her own digs, once asking if I was a vegetarian for attention because I didn't eat pork. At first, I thought it was just an adjustment period. I wasn't local, I wasn't raised in a small town, and I didn't come from a family business. I was quieter than Clark's boisterous cousins, and I worked in finance, which to them might as well have been witchcraft. I smiled, I offered to help at gatherings, I brought dessert. No one ever asked for the recipe. Then came Bryn's wedding. Clark's little sister. The one who threw a fit at her engagement party because someone else wore white. She had picked the kind of wedding you see in a bridal magazine, all cream table linens, green garlands, and a catered four-course meal. I had helped her quietly behind the scenes, offering to cover the florist when Clark forgot to transfer the money on time. She thanked me once, briefly. That was it. The day of the wedding, Clark and I were assigned to a table near the back, not unusual, but odd given he was the bride's brother. I didn't care. I didn't want attention. Dinner began table by table. I was sipping water, smiling politely at one of the cousins talking about deer hunting, when the server approached with 2 plates. Before I could even lift my hand, Clark waved it off. "Don't worry about her plate, she'll eat later," he said with a dismissive grin. The server hesitated. I looked at Clark. "She's used to scraps anyway," Helena chimed in, laughing from the other end of the table. There was a beat of silence. Then Roberta laughed too. Clark didn't even glance at me. I folded my napkin in my lap. Smooth, careful. I placed it on the table, stood up quietly, and walked outside. I didn't slam my chair or make a scene. I just walked. The cool March air hit me the second I stepped out. Crisp, but not cold enough to stop what I was doing. Earlier that morning, I'd packed something in the trunk of our car. Not because I had planned this exact moment, but because I had a feeling I might need to remind myself that I wasn't powerless. It was a small cooler bag. Navy blue. Looked like any other lunch tote. I walked back into the reception with it in hand. The music was still playing softly, the room still full of polite laughter and clinking glasses. But as I walked, people noticed. I reached our table. Clark was still talking, unaware I'd returned. I placed the cooler in front of him. He looked up. "What's that?" "Dessert," I said simply. I opened the cooler. Inside were 5 envelopes, each sealed neatly, labeled with names. I handed one to Roberta. "That's a 6-month breakdown of Clark's business credit card. You'll recognize the hotel charges in La Crosse and the boutique charges in Chicago. Just thought you should know where some of the family business funds are going." Her face paled. She didn't say a word. I handed one to Helena. "That's an audio file from last Thursday, when you and Roberta were on speakerphone in the kitchen. You mentioned how I must be sticking around for the money and how girls like me don't belong in legacy families. You didn't know I was home early that day. Helena's laugh died instantly. She looked like she'd swallowed glass. Then I turned to Bryn. That's the florist's invoice I paid in full after Clark forgot to send the check. It's already settled with the vendor. Just thought you should have the receipt for your records. Bryn said nothing, just blinked slowly like she was watching a slow-motion car crash. Finally, I looked at Clark. I didn't hand him an envelope. I pulled out a manila folder instead. Inside were signed divorce papers. They've already been filed. The footage from our Ring camera last weekend with Angela coming and going, I made sure that's included. Angela, his assistant. The same one who once asked if she could borrow one of my scarves for a last-minute gala. Right. There was a pause. Not a sound from our table. Someone across the room dropped a fork. It clinked sharply on the floor. I placed the manila folder down, zipped up the cooler, and looked around. I just wanted dessert, I said, since dinner wasn't an option. Then I walked out. I didn't drive off immediately. I sat in the car for a moment, watching the warm light of the reception hall blur through the windshield. I wasn't crying. I wasn't angry anymore. I was exhausted and relieved. I drove to a friend's place in Madison, the one who always kept wine in the fridge and didn't ask too many questions. I crashed on her couch, still in my green dress, and stared at the ceiling for hours. She handed me a glass of Malbec and said, I always knew you were smarter than all of them combined. The next morning, I filed a restraining order for the financial information I had to protect during the divorce. Clark texted once, can we talk without the drama? I didn't reply. The day after Bryn's wedding, I turned my phone off. I wasn't ready to hear the apologies that weren't real or the outrage that wasn't for me. I stayed at my friend Noreen's house for 2 nights. She had one of those homes that smelled like lavender and brewed coffee at the same time. She let me take up space without needing to fill it with words. She was the first person I told everything to, all the cracks I had ignored, all the compromises I had made, all the little humiliations I had brushed off. I didn't cry when I told her Clark had cheated. I didn't cry when I said Helena once called me furniture in front of guests because I blended into the background. But I did cry when I told her I used to rehearse what I was going to say at dinner, just to avoid being talked over. The emails started pouring in by Monday. Roberta sent a message titled, Let's be adults about this. She wrote that while my actions had hurt the family, she hoped I could still show discretion and avoid further embarrassment. It read more like a cease and desist than an olive branch. Clark sent a message the same day. 3 sentences. Can we meet and talk? I get that you were upset. I think there's a way to fix this if we both stay calm. He still didn't get it. Upset? Upset is what you are when someone forgets an anniversary. I wasn't upset. I was done. I had already retained a lawyer through a colleague of Noreen's. I'd prepared most of the paperwork weeks ago, once I found the texts from Angela on Clark's phone. The same Angela who used to call me Mrs. C with a smile too wide to trust. She had started leaving things at our place, a scarf in the laundry basket, a coffee sleeve with her name on it in our kitchen trash. The Ring footage was the last straw. Still, walking away wasn't instant. We owned property together, a small 2-bedroom condo downtown, and had finances tied up in his family's business. Not shares, but I had helped file taxes, helped him cover payroll one tight quarter, even pulled from my own savings when one of their stores was vandalized. That money was long gone, but the receipts weren't. When I finally sat across from him a week later, in a lawyer's office, with a glass wall between us, he looked smaller. Not in a sad, remorseful way. Just deflated. Like a kid caught cheating on a test but still hoping for extra credit. I didn't think you'd go this far, he said, fidgeting with his jacket sleeve. I didn't answer right away. I watched him like someone watching a man behind a glass tank, all that rage and confusion, trapped in his own making. You humiliated me, he said, low, his voice almost a growl. I tilted my head. No. I told the truth. You did the rest. That meeting didn't go anywhere. We left with a timeline and a temporary order for him to vacate the condo within 2 weeks. I didn't ask for alimony. I didn't want a cent from his family's stores. What I wanted was distance, legal, physical, and emotional. In the weeks that followed, I started to reclaim my life in strange, small ways. I made meals I liked, not the ones he used to scoff at. I listened to the music I loved, the indie playlists he used to mock as coffeehouse crap. I bought a new couch. Not because I needed one, but because it felt symbolic. I sold the old one, the one we'd argued on, napped on, and once spilled red wine on during a New Year's Eve party we both pretended to enjoy. One afternoon, I stopped by the condo to pick up a few more of my things. I had asked Clark not to be there, and he wasn't. But someone else had been. Angela's perfume lingered in the bedroom. A strong floral, powdery scent I recognized from her days shadowing Clark at family events. I found one of her earrings on the nightstand. That was the moment I let out a laugh. Not bitter. Not even sad. Just disbelief at how obvious it had all been, and how long I had tried not to see it. The Merricks? They imploded in slow motion. A cousin reached out privately to tell me Helena had retired from most family duties, citing stress. Bryn posted a filtered family photo with a caption about overcoming drama. She never once messaged me directly after the wedding, not even to ask about the florist or the money. Roberta's email silence, though, was deafening. I suppose she finally realized she couldn't guilt-trip me into silence the way she used to with Clark. Meanwhile, Clark had moved in with Angela. I heard it through a mutual friend who ran into them at a brunch place near the lake. Apparently, he introduced her as someone new. Of course. No sense of time. No sense of shame. But I wasn't watching from the sidelines anymore. I had removed myself from their theater. One of the hardest things I did during that time was write a letter to myself. Not a journal entry, not a to-do list, a letter. I wrote, "You were never weak. You were quiet, because no one deserved your fire yet. But now, you burn for you." The process wasn't linear. Some nights, I cried. I missed the version of Clark I fell for, not the man he was, but the man he pretended to be. I missed the idea of having in-laws who accepted me. I missed believing that love alone was enough. But healing came. Slowly. Honestly. Through the noise and the silence. Through letters and new locks and coffee dates with friends who never once made me feel like I had to earn my worth. And while I didn't speak to anyone in the Merrick family again, I did get one last surprise. It came in the form of a package. Inside, a wedding favor from Bryn's reception, mailed to my old address. A sugar cookie shaped like a rose, with B+C Forever iced across it. I stared at it for a long time before setting it down. Still sealed. Still untouched. Like so many things in that family, pretty on the outside, but empty inside. After the cookie showed up in the mail, I thought I was done hearing from the Merricks. But life has a way of pushing in echoes from the past just when you start to quiet your mind. About a month after the divorce was filed, I got a voicemail from an unfamiliar number. I almost didn't check it. But something told me to listen. "Hi. This is Ira. I'm Bryn's fiancé. Well, husband now, I guess." He paused for a long second. "I know this is unexpected, but can you give me a call? I think we should talk." I sat with that message for 3 days. Ira was always polite to me, but quiet, observant. The kind of guy who noticed things and said nothing. I remembered once catching him watching Clark talk over me at dinner. He didn't intervene, but his jaw clenched, the only giveaway. Curiosity eventually won over hesitation. I called him back. He answered immediately. "Thanks for calling me. I wasn't sure you would." His voice was calm, measured. Not cautious, just careful. "I don't want to get in the middle of anything. But I owe you something," he said. I should have spoken up sooner. At the wedding, I saw what happened. And I saw how how he acted after. I didn't say anything. I just let him speak. I didn't know what he was doing with Angela. But I know how he talked about you when you weren't in the room. I thought he was just blowing off steam, but now I realize he was erasing you. That phrase, erasing you, stuck with me. That's exactly what it had felt like, slowly, year by year. I was disappearing in that marriage, becoming a background figure in my own life. I just wanted to say I'm sorry, Ira said. You didn't deserve that. He didn't ask for anything. He didn't try to soften it. Just said his piece and wished me well. It was the only true apology I got from any of them. After that call, I stopped checking my old email address. Too many ghosts. I bought a new phone. I moved to a new apartment near Lake of the Isles, a place where I could hear birds in the morning and see water out the window. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. I didn't talk much about the wedding incident with new people. Not at first. It was a private wound, and I wasn't ready to wear it like armor. But over time, in safer circles, I started sharing pieces of it. At a women's networking event, someone asked what brought me back to Minneapolis. I paused and said, a hardware empire and a lemon of a marriage. Laughter broke out around the table, and just like that, I realized I could own the story, without the shame. One night, I ran into someone from my old job downtown. We grabbed coffee. She asked if I'd ever consider coming back to finance full-time. I told her maybe. She smiled and said, "You look lighter." I did feel lighter. Not fixed. Not finished. But freer. Still, the anger wasn't completely gone. It showed up in strange places, like the grocery store, when I passed by the brand of wine Clark used to buy for me only when we had guests, as if I didn't deserve it otherwise. Or when I found an old sweater that still smelled like our old place and couldn't decide if I wanted to wash it or burn it. I wasn't angry at the wedding moment itself. That had become a punchline in my new narrative. What stayed with me was all the little humiliations before that. The jokes at my expense. The silence when I needed defending. The way I was expected to swallow every offense and smile through it, as if grace meant invisibility. And then, unexpectedly, something shifted. I was out running errands one afternoon when I stopped by a local bookstore. I hadn't been in one for a while, too many memories tied up in shared shelves, shared spaces. But this time felt different. I let myself browse. In the back corner, I found a book of essays called Leaving Loud. I don't even remember what drew me to it. I bought it, took it home, and read half of it in one sitting. One line in particular hit me hard: some people only love you when you're small enough to control. When you grow, they call it betrayal. It was like reading the thesis statement of my last 7 years. I started journaling after that. Not just letters to myself, real, raw entries. Sometimes they were angry. Sometimes they were sad. But more and more, they started sounding like me. The version of me before Clark. The version I buried to make room for someone else's comfort. One night, I wrote something down that would stay with me. They didn't break me. They just revealed what I'd been giving away too cheaply, my silence. It had been about 3 months since the wedding. I had fallen into a rhythm that felt almost like healing. I was freelancing for 2 small firms and walking the trails near Lake Harriet every morning, even on days when the wind stung my cheeks. I'd stopped refreshing my old email and blocked every Merrick number I hadn't already deleted. It felt like peace. Until one morning, a message came in through LinkedIn of all places, an inbox I checked maybe once every other week. "Hey. This is weird, but I'm trying to get in touch about Clark Merrick. If you're willing to talk, I'd really appreciate it." Mara. I didn't know the name. No company listed, no mutual connections. I stared at it for a while, and something about it made my stomach tighten. I ignored it. For 2 days. Then I got a follow-up. Shorter. Blunter. I think we have something in common. And I think you might want to know. This time, I clicked her profile. She was about 10 years younger than me, based in Green Bay. Marketing specialist. Nothing jumped out, except one photo that made my heart sink. It was an old group photo from a fundraiser Clark's family sponsored. And there she was, smiling, standing too close to Clark in a way I recognized all too well. Not inappropriately, but intimately. I replied. Just 3 words, what about Clark? Her response came within an hour. She asked if we could talk, phone, Zoom, in person, whatever I was comfortable with. I chose a video call. If I was going to open that box again, I needed to see her eyes. We scheduled it for Saturday afternoon. I sat at my small dining table, laptop open, with tea that I forgot to drink. She popped up on screen, looking nervous. Her voice was small. I'm not sure how to start. I was with Clark. For 2 years. While he was married to you. The words hit like glass cracking. I sat perfectly still. I didn't know he was married, she said quickly. Not at first. He told me he was divorced. Said it was messy. Said you had mental health issues, that you disappeared. My mouth opened. Then closed. Mara swallowed. I only found out the truth when I accidentally saw your name on some shared business documents in his car. I Googled you. Found some old mentions. A conference bio. Then I found your profile. I've wanted to reach out for weeks, but I didn't know how to say any of this. I had heard enough to believe her. Angela wasn't the only one. I know that now. But Mara was the first to look me in the eye and say it. Not with guilt, not with malice, just grief. For both of us. Did you know about the wedding? I asked. She shook her head. I found out about that the day after. He came back and acted like nothing happened. Like it was just another family event. I stared at her. She laughed, but it was brittle. He never talked about you. Not really. You were just a name on a box, a story that kept changing. But when I saw how he moved around the truth, I knew I was next. Mara left him a week after the wedding. She said she took a job offer in Madison and cut contact. But she'd carried it, the guilt, the anger, the confusion, and finally decided to track me down because, in her words, he shouldn't keep getting away with rewriting everything. We talked for almost 2 hours. It wasn't about pain. It was about clarity. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. And I wasn't looking to give it. But we found something strange and mutual, a kind of woman-to-woman understanding that only comes when you both survived the same emotional storm under different roofs. Before we ended the call, she said one last thing. Everyone always says you're the lucky one when you leave. But they never talk about how long it takes to feel lucky. That stuck with me. It still does. After that call, I started seeing things more clearly. The lies weren't just in what Clark had said, they were in the silence I accepted. In this way I allowed myself to be isolated, softened, and kept small. The wedding moment wasn't a spark. It was the final straw in a stack of buried things I never gave myself permission to feel. And Mara's story helped me realize something else. It was never just about infidelity. It was about identity. About how someone can slowly convince you that your discomfort is an overreaction, your instincts are overreaching, and your boundaries are burdens. I wasn't just reclaiming my time. I was reclaiming myself. Around that time, I joined a divorce support group. Quietly, anonymously at first. Most of the people were older than me, a few widowed, a few just out of long marriages where they'd been quietly unhappy for decades. One evening, the group leader asked us all a question: what was the moment you knew you weren't going back? I waited my turn. Then I said, when someone told me I was used to scraps. And I realized I believed them. The room went still. One woman put her hand on her chest. I hadn't said it to get a reaction. I just finally said it out loud. And in that moment, I think I forgave myself for staying as long as I did. Not fully, but enough. By the time summer rolled around, the legal process had slowed to the predictable crawl that happens when lawyers stop pretending to be efficient. Clark's team delayed things with unnecessary revisions, mostly aimed at buying time, not to fight, but to frustrate. The condo sale was the last piece to finalize. I didn't want it. Not because I didn't deserve it, but because I didn't want a single brick of my life to be tied to that man anymore. We agreed to sell and split the profit, which would have been simple, if not for Clark dragging his feet. That's when I decided to stop waiting and start building something else. A few weeks later, I filed paperwork for a business license under a name I had been sitting on for months, Second Course Financial. It was a boutique advising firm that offered one-on-one financial literacy coaching for women going through major life transitions, divorce, career shifts, widowhood, you name it. I wasn't rich. I wasn't even especially ambitious in the way Clark's family measured success. But I was doing something that mattered, something I cared about. And more than anything, I was free. By fall, the condo finally sold. My lawyer called to tell me the check would arrive within a few days. It was a decent chunk of money, not life-changing, but enough for a clean restart. I used part of it to finally take a trip I'd put off for years, Maine, in October. Just me, a cabin rental, and a worn copy of a novel I never finished in my 20s. One chilly morning in Bar Harbor, watching waves crash against jagged rocks, I had this moment of surreal calm. No notifications. No obligations. Just me. Breathing, without apology. And then I got the letter. It was forwarded from my old address. Handwritten. No return address, but the handwriting was unmistakably familiar. It was from Clark. I considered throwing it out without reading it. But curiosity got the better of me. Inside, just a single page. Not even on nice paper. Scribbled. Sloppy. I'm not writing to beg. I know it's over. But I wanted you to know that Angela left. She said she didn't sign up for emotional baggage. Ironic, right? I miss you. You were calm in the chaos. You made everything work. And I didn't realize what I had until I watched it walk out the door with a cooler bag in hand. That last line almost made me laugh. He ended it with, "You probably hate me. But I hope you remember the good parts. That's all. Take care of yourself." See, I folded it up and set it on the nightstand. Didn't cry. Didn't feel much of anything, honestly. The old me would have turned that letter over in her mind for weeks, analyzing every word. Me in Maine? She made tea, went for a walk, and forgot about it by sundown. But revenge? That came later. And it didn't require confrontation. Back in Minneapolis, I received the final settlement documents. Divorce finalized. Clean split. His lawyer added a note asking if I wanted to keep my name or revert. I kept my married name for one reason only, to use it against him. You see, Clark was still operating under the assumption that he'd get the family business handed over eventually. Roberta had stepped back, and the Merrick name was their whole brand. Trust. Legacy. Respect. So I trademarked Merrick and Company. Women's Financial Recovery, a division of my new firm. Perfectly legal. I was still a Merrick on paper. And they'd never trademarked the name for consulting, only retail. Rookie mistake. I launched it quietly, a website, a newsletter, some press through local women's business networks. Within 3 months, the name was trending in Wisconsin's small business communities. Not because I pushed it, but because it resonated. And because I told the story. Not the wrongdoing, not the gossip. Just the truth, a woman recovering from betrayal, reclaiming her identity, and helping others do the same. Roberta's lawyers sent a cease and desist. My lawyer sent back a full report of our filing dates and a note that read, "She is, in fact, a Merrick." legally and currently. We never heard from them again. But I did hear from others. Clients. Strangers. Other ex-wives. Women who sat across kitchen tables with unopened bills and broken confidence, and left with a plan and a fire in their bellies. I never slandered Clark. I never had to. He told the world who he was with every careless word and empty apology. I just existed, loudly, visibly, unapologetically, and that was enough to bury him under the weight of his own history. I even started getting invites to speak. Small conferences, podcast interviews, women's networks. One day, I got a text from Mara. Mara, just saw your name on a panel for a financial wellness event in Madison. You're slaughter it. If you ever need a marketing boost, I'd love to collaborate. We grabbed lunch a week later. 2 women. 2 survivors. No bitterness, just energy. As we were walking out of the cafe, she turned and said, "Funny how they thought we were weak." I smiled. We were just quiet. Big difference. And that's it. No screaming matches. No door slams. No poison in the wine or public shaming. Just a quiet woman in a green dress, walking away from a table that never respected her, and building a new one from scratch. I left with nothing, and built everything. I didn't need revenge that burned. I just needed truth, time, and a little bit of tea. And a cooler bag. Can't forget the cooler bag.